Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Dezeen and Bentley Lighthouse Talk. My name is Max Fraser, and I'm the editorial director of Dezeen. It's a great pleasure for me to be hosting today's discussion here at Cromwell Place during London Design Festival 2023. The title of the talk today is Towards a New Future of Mobility, and this is the second talk that's being filmed as part of a Lighthouse Talks collaboration between Dezeen and Bentley, part of a 3-year collaboration between us that will see Bentley working with Dezeen to inspire the next generation of design talents, as well as champion design excellence and sustainable solutions. During today's discussion, we will consider the future of mobility, of course, as the title suggests, and how humans will be impacted by rapid developments in the transport sector. We'll be discussing the expansion of electrification, the modernization of public transport, the uptake of shared and micro-mobility, and the developments in autonomous vehicles. We'll also be considering how urban planning is responding to this, and indeed infrastructural change, and ultimately how architects are responding to these changes and moving us forward. I'm joined by a great panel of experts today. On my left, I have Robin Pagee. He's the design director at Bentley Motors. Next to him, we have Kirsty Dias, a managing director of Priestman Goode. Next, Karla, Jakeman. She's the head of automated transport at TRL. And then finally, to her left, Yves Béhar, founder and principal designer at Fuseproject. So in a moment, I'm going to ask each of the speakers to introduce themselves with a little bit more than I've just told you, just so you have some context as to what each of them does in relation to this particular topic. And then we'll spend about 40 minutes or so in discussion. So let's get going. Robin, give us your 1 minute elevator pitch.
No problem. So Robin Pagee, design director at Bentley. I've spent the majority of my career at Bentley. I was there sketching for the first Continental GT for the interior, and then I led the team to do the full range of the Continental GT, the Mulsanne range, and also the state limousine for the Queen, which was nice. With being part of Volkswagen Group, I also worked on Bugatti interiors. Then I left and went to Volvo. I was at Volvo for 10 years. The first part was as head of interior, and that was creating the new generation of Volvos. And then the last 6 years, I've been leading the global team to basically go from a transformation into full electrification. Part of that as well was with Polestar, creating a new electric brand. And then I've been at Bentley now for 2 weeks. This is my second week. It's quite weird being back to meet old friends and new colleagues, but now Bentley is going to take that journey into electrification as well, so I'm going to be leading that. All right.
Excellent. Thank you, Robin. Kirsty.
I'm Kirsty Dias. I am the managing director of Priestman Goode. We're a design consultancy focused on designing the future and specialising in transport design. So we work in rail, in aviation, and in future mobility. Really passionate about public transport, really focused on sustainability and accessibility and envisaging how we will travel in the future. I've worked for Priestman Goode for, I think, 21 or 22 years, so a very long time. But in that time, we've really kind of evolved and grown as a company. We've become employee-owned, and increasingly we work on kind of full transport systems, looking at the whole kind of infrastructure system. And very pleased to be here. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Kirsty. And Karla.
Hi, I'm Karla Jakeman. I'm currently the head of automated transport at TRL. Been in transport for too many years, 25-ish years. So I started as doing design quality engineer for a automotive maker. From there, I was there for a long time. From there, I went to Innovate UK, who are the government's innovation agency, really trying to encourage innovation in connected transport. So I looked after a variety of different modes of transport across from active travel, you're cycling, you're walking, all the way across to highways and some of the technologies around there. But now looking after the area of automation at TRL. You might not have heard of TRL, but you've all used zebra crossings. We invented them. So that's our claim to fame.
Right. Does TRL stand for?
It was Transport Research Laboratory, but we've kind of moved away from that a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yves.
Well, Yves Béhar. I'm the founder, CEO of Fuseproject, but most importantly, I design there every day with my team. Over the years, we have really not focused on anything specific, but rather innovation, from one of the first LED lamps, from the first Bluetooth speakers with the jam box, the Samsung Frame TV, the Snoo the happiest baby Snoo, for example, just to use a few. And in the, since the beginning, we've done mobility projects, transportation projects, but they've tended to remain secret, as the industry is. And then recently, for the last year, I've become a partner with Fuseproject in Tello. It's a new pickup truck or a new truck company, and we're focused on small, high throughput, high efficiency, high range, high performance, but small vehicles. Something that you don't really get in small EVs is a level of performance that's expected in larger cars.
Wonderful. Thank you all for that. I wanted to ask you all a question to begin with, so maybe we'll do it in reverse this time, around mobility and transport design and the rapid transformations that we're seeing. Which changes, maybe present and future, do you think are proving kind of most transformative?
Well, I think the electric EVs have been transformative. I'm one of the very few people, I can say, that has driven the same electric car for 10 and a half years continuously. I got a number 100 of the Tesla Model S in 2011, and that was my only car for about 10 and a half years. And I have to say, there are things in sort of the EV experience that are underreported today that I think make it truly a no-brainer. I mean, initially I got an EV because, I wanted the green credentials, and it was important, I think, to lead with that. But the cost of ownership is near zero. There is no changing, there's no motor failures, there's no oil, there's nothing. And the last 6 years of the car passed the warranty, right, for after 4 years. Believe it or not, the car's never been in the garage. I didn't even change the brakes. So my only costs were really the tires, changing the tires. And that is something that is truly transformative compared to the cost of traditional engines and traditional cars past a certain age. Now I have a new EV, and I have to say, the performance, the ease of use, is something that I continue to be impressed by. What I think has been missing is, in many ways, the way Generation 1 and Generation 2 EVs have been built is very much in the same way that traditional, gasoline engine cars have been built. And so we haven't seen yet true configurations that take advantage of what EV can give us. You still see cars with like trunks in the front, even though you don't need anything in the front. You still see a lot of fake grills in the front for air intake, even though you don't need that. I see Robin laughing. And I think the third generation EVs are truly going to take advantage of what the technology can do from a design standpoint, from a user standpoint, from a practicality standpoint.
Yeah, and we'll come on to some of those points that you raised there a little bit later on. But Karla, do you want to chime in with your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say I think one of the biggest transformations is the consideration of human factors when it comes to transport. So we're a lot more aware of when it comes to designing stations or designing vehicles. We're thinking more about different types, rather it just being for a 95 percentile male. We're thinking of those different groups. We're building in accessibility challenges for visible and invisible from the beginning in new technologies like autonomous vehicles. So they're not bolt-on like they have been in the past, because we were at we had that legacy Victorian transport system. So we're a lot more aware of some of the human factor challenges. And I think that being inbuilt into some of the design of different transport infrastructure and systems, I think is pretty great, pretty transformative.
Yeah, that's certainly positive news.
Yeah.
Kirsty?
I mean, I would absolutely agree with that. I think accessibility is becoming, the foundation. So that's where all the transport, systems should be starting from. I also think there's, what we've seen in recent years is tackling kind of first and last mile. So really thinking about, the shared scooters and the shared bikes to really help you enter public transport systems. But I do think, in all our conversations, it's really important to kind of understand the context that you're operating in, because there's a huge difference between creating a multimodal transport system in a city than there is in a kind of rural environment. And understanding the needs of all of those users is really important. And that's where, of course, if we look at EV, where electric vehicle infrastructure comes in around charging, how quickly and how accessible is that? Where are people accessing that? Not assuming that is just going to be in your kind of private home, that you do need kind of the public access to those points in public areas.
Yeah, which is still kind of lagging.
Those two things are not happening fast enough, I think, together.
Yeah.
And I'll probably hark back a little bit to the transformation of the electrification, because as Yves was touching on there, it's not just about the new technology and the platform. It opens up a whole discussion in terms of a design step forward of the technology, the core computer, the experience of electric cars, and you start to build on that. You question things like the grille, because why do we need things like that? So it's a big chance to do a step change from normal automotive design into electrification, but beyond that into then the technology that you get embedded around it. Also the experience to the customer, and it opens up this kind of box of design opportunities that's a brilliant chapter that you can really challenge the industry and move things forward. Exciting times.
Yeah, so let's talk about this sort of liberation, I suppose, of electric vehicles in a design typology sense. You touched upon how, well, you both now touched upon how we're kind of riding, as it were, an old design language with electric cars unnecessarily. How would you envisage that's going to change, and are you trying to change it yourselves, Yves?
Well, I think it requires a different mindset from car companies, from going from being very marketing driven, being very brand driven, being very following certain platforms, because there is a sort of industrialization base of the products that have been there. So and that's specifically a bigger problem for smaller cars, because if you look at the smaller cars, their range and performance, it's really not acceptable in my opinion. But car manufacturers are constrained by these platforms that they've already created, and for efficiency reasons, legacy reasons, they continue to build on those, which are not the most, which won't give you really high performing cars. So at the high end, you have Tesla, who has captured the high end part of the market. On the low end, you have Chinese manufacturers, and that really squeezes traditional European manufacturers in the middle in an interesting fashion, where now they need to make much bigger changes than I think they were anticipating. But I think the opportunities are vast. I mean, when you look at even just safety systems, the things that we can do now with AI, with ADAS systems. One of the co-founders of Tello comes from that world. The other one comes from batteries, was one of the first engineers at Tesla, number 16, in fact. And what we're able to do is to take about 350-mile range battery, sort of put it together differently, which really allows you to have now high performance in a small lightweight vehicle, which you can park in cities. So I think, and then I love all the innovations that you can do around users, around sort of everyday use. Because now you have this powered vehicle that can deliver, I would say, in a 360-degree way, different functionality at different times of the day or for different needs. So for us, whether you're a surfer, whether you're a contractor in the city, whether you're a weekender, whether you're focused on city life, we can deliver all these fun, magical, moments.
And then just in terms of aesthetics as well, do you think it's sort of partly the kind of shock of the new that we can't just immediately change the image of the car as we've kind of got used to?
No, it's. I mean, if you think back to, there's almost a rule book of designing a car from the past, which was a lot about the bottom of the A-post to the centre of the wheel, and that dimension gave you what we call the premium proportion, because it's about the size of the engine in front of you. Now, you don't need an engine, so we take that away. And the proportion that then becomes important is the one in between the wheels, because that is where the power pack now is. So you start to see a trend of wheelbases getting longer. Then the next influence you get is aerodynamics, because that's directly relation to range. So then it turns into kind of shorter overhangs, longer rear overhangs, lower cabins. So that starts to automatically transform proportions into the industry. Then the next one is what you're connecting to there is actually it changes the interior space, because now you've got a flat floor and you've got a bigger cabin for the whole length of the car. Then you can start to play around with how you use that interior space, especially as we walk towards autonomous drive. So it's kind of a really exciting chapter in terms of electrification. It's not just a powertrain, it's an actual change in philosophy of how to design cars.
I mean, we talk about a lot of positive elements of electrification, of course. Reduction of tailpipe, carbon emissions, and harmful particulates by getting rid of fossil fuels, these kind of things. But would any of you like to touch upon what new problems you might envisage electrification causing?
Well, so I actually, it's hard to find sort of a downside. So my car, 10 and a half years in, I sold it for a very high reselling price, much higher. Yeah. My battery performance diminished by 15%. Let's say it goes down after 25 years of car ownership, which there are not many 25-year-old cars on the roads. Those batteries are reused for long-term storage, for example. Currently, the best plans you can see for distributed grids in cities and in urban environments is the car as your house battery, or whether it's for emergency or for balancing the grid. So, these, I think there is a lot of other benefits, sort of long-term benefits to EVs, to electric cars that we're not, seeing right now. The idea that, once an electric car is a certain age, we're going to bury the batteries in the ground is not at all what's going to happen. In fact, the recycling and recalibrating of batteries for the next, for their next life is going to be multi-billion-dollar industry that a few people smartly started a few years ago before the capacity came back in. So, yeah, I'm 99% positive. Okay.
I was just going to touch on a project that we did a couple of years ago where we worked with quite a small company on a battery generator for the film industry using recycled Tesla batteries. And so I think that, there's great opportunity, and there's so much more around battery technology and what we can do.
Yeah. Let's move on to autonomous vehicles. I've got my eye on you, Karla, for this one. You're doing a lot of interesting work. Autonomous vehicles, we've been talking about them for quite a long time, I feel like. There's a lot of safety concerns, there's a lot of regulations you would expect, but it has the potential to rid our roads of congestion, prevent accidents, and indeed liberate us as human beings from the driving seat entirely. Where are we at? Tell us what you're up to.
Oh, we're on the journey. It's a lot more complicated, I think, than we probably originally thought. But there are so many different things that we need to consider, as you mentioned, around the safety case for testing, the regulations, which differ between different countries. So there's lots of challenges there. There is the technologies that we're talking about. Some of the technologies we've been talking about, how we can merge them into each other. But a lot of vehicles already have a lot of these technologies. So a lot of you will have cruise control or lane keeping assist or adaptive braking. And a lot of you probably think you might not have been in an autonomous vehicle. And you might not think you've been in a connected vehicle. I'm looking around the room to see what people are thinking.
But you have.
But the minute you get in a car with a mobile phone, that car becomes connected. So, it's a bit of a misnomer, really. But the progress that we are making, we are doing some amazing testing. We've got we've had vehicles driving around London without a driver. There's a safety driver, but we're making big progress. And it's not just on passenger vehicles as well. It's also around construction, mining, agriculture. So, and they're actually probably going to be the areas where autonomous vehicles will be seen first, to be honest, because there's no pesky passengers in all of that regulation. So it's a lot easier in those industries.
But you're independent from any car brands. So what specifically are you doing? Are you fitting the technology to a whole range of different vehicles for different brands? For
TRL?
Yeah.
Specifically, the main thing that we do is the safety case development. So as you can imagine from the zebra crossing analogy, we are very safety focused. So we will work with other projects who are putting vehicles on the roads to work with them through their safety case, so we can make sure that it meets the regulations and the guidance as much as possible. So we'll work with standards agencies and the government to make sure that those vehicles comply and that they are as safe as possible. Because one of the challenges we've got is around public perception. And a lot of people will think autonomous vehicles, it's all a bit Star Trek and, it's not going to affect me in my lifetime, but it will do. It already is. So we've got to change that public perception, and we need people to feel that they're safe and that all of these safety considerations have been taken care of.
I was talking to Karla earlier. We did a test vehicle where we put a small young graduate in the back seat of the car, hidden underneath some controls was a steering wheel and brakes and pedals. And then we asked members of the public to come in and test drive this new autonomous vehicle. And we set off on the road, and of course at first they were a bit nervous, but we're controlling the car from behind, so it's not an autonomous vehicle. It was to test the mindset of people. Within 10 minutes, this guy we're talking about his holidays, and he's still kind of got one eye on the traffic, and then we get more interested in his holiday, and then he said, oh yeah, I've got this photograph of... And within that 10 minutes, he's trusted the technology because it's not doing anything unusual.
Right.
But he's used to it, and it's that quick with autonomous drive that you'll be amazed when it is working, how quickly everyone will get used to it. I think it's just the journey, as you're saying, it's a stepping stone of technology. The way to get there is to continuously update the pilot assist technologies and collecting data. And then gradually it will come into then you realize you're in autonomous technology levels. It won't be this kind of leap. It'll be more of a stepping stone. And that will grow in the industries.
Yves,
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I was just going to say that I think also one of those stepping stones is the autonomous vehicles that work on fixed systems. So, for example, we've been working with a company called Dromos that I know Karla is familiar with, But I think there's a real opportunity there in quite specific environments where a vehicle, let's say on a kind of large healthcare complex, might have a place where it's actually moving in buildings and externally to, support mobility in quite a, restricted way from an accessibility perspective, but that will also help trust in terms of safety. And that will be part of the journey to full autonomy. I don't know what you think about that, Karla.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. There is the, consideration in hospitals and all of those different areas where it's got its place, it's got its uses. So the more use cases that we can come up with in those kind of scenarios, it's going to impact everybody. I think an interesting scenario that someone said to me when I couldn't quite get my head around it was, if you think years ago, when you got into a lift to go into a tall building, somebody else would press the button for you and take you to the floor you wanted to go to. These days, you just get in that metal box and it takes you where you want to go. You don't even think about it. Our mindset has changed. And even sort of putting your hand out, if someone says, hold the lift, years ago, you'd never have put your hand out because you might have lost it. But these days, because the sensors there and the doors will open again, you put your hand out, you trust the technology without even thinking about it. So it's a gradual, these stepping stones that are a little, stealth-like.
Well, what I find amazing is we're seeing the future being created literally in our streets. I live in San Francisco, and there's probably 15 plus companies testing their vehicles and testing their systems there at the same time. And of course, you get the press to kind of focus on all the negatives, and it creates this kind of fear and resistance to it. But in San Francisco, they're giving rides without drivers now. You can get rides, I think, on Cruise and Waymo, I think. There's definitely we live in an era where so much of the focus in the public discourse is on the negative. Even electric cars. Electric cars, there's these tropes that they catch fire. They catch fire, but statistically, it's 10 to 20 times less than gasoline cars. But you have to kind of seep through this sort of clickbait kind of mentality out there to really see what the possibilities are. And I think the main challenge is going to be industrial applications and healthcare applications. The others are absolutely first, but I think there will be some thinking of the business model that needs to happen, because currently the sort of top level systems are very, very pricey. Those spinning radars on top of cars. It's probably expensive. 100 plus €100,000 per car.
Right.
I was just going to add, though, to obstacles to kind of electrification and stop. It is timely that we speak about this week in the UK. It shouldn't be a political issue. It shouldn't be used as a vote winner for a populist vote, because the climate issue is it's bigger than an electoral term, and we really, really need to work as industry to work beyond politics to ensure that we're working together to convince people that it is a safe and responsible area to focus on.
Absolutely.
I'm just conscious that there's quite a lot of other areas of mobility that I'd like to talk about. So maybe we could nudge a little bit nearer towards public transport, but a sort of hybrid, I suppose, this growth that we've seen of shared mobility in cities, city bikes, these kind of things, the scooters around the place, and of course shared vehicles as well. It's already helped a lot of urbanites, if you like, to sort of shift away from private car ownership. Do you envisage that this will become more dominant in cities? Or will it only ever be a kind of tiny percentage of the market?
example?
Robin?
I mean, we've done studies, and I've worked as well with shared mobility companies doing some design exercises with them. Within that project, I remember it was about a 2-year project, and halfway through the project, we went from pool sharing. It was 6 people in a car, into actually no, we don't want that anymore. We're seeing our trends going in the way that people want 2 seats and they want to be on their own, and it's a kind of I can't really predict what's going to happen in the future, because there is this mix of what people want. Sometimes they want to go for the cost-efficient share option, happy to do that. Other times they want their own space and their own environment. And of course, with Bentley, that's in a customer that is used to their own space and environment, and they want even more of that. But I think it's, at the end of the day, I think if customers have got a choice and we develop systems that are the most efficient and best for the environment, then both will be used, and then it's whether the percentages of one goes up versus the other.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is about choice, and those perceptions will change. So if you think, a lot of us today probably sat thigh to thigh on a tube next to some random stranger and didn't really, we don't particularly like it, but it doesn't bother us too much. But as soon as you put that thigh to thigh in a small vehicle, that atmosphere completely changes, and it's a very different perception. So I definitely think there are some challenges around that we need to work through to try and make people feel safer, that it's okay to do that, to give them that choice, or whether it's a micromobility, an e-scooter or e-bike. It's got to be personal choice. We're an on-demand nation. We want to have everything as a smorgasbord that we can say, I'd like that and that, and combination of them as well.
And we've got the opportunity to create interiors, particularly in autonomous, that we can configure to specific needs. I mean, I think we will definitely see that more kind of flexible configuration coming, where you determine, how you want the interior to be set up, who you're traveling with, how you're traveling, if you've got a bike. I mean, we've certainly explored those kinds of things through concepts like New Car for London.
Yeah, I like the notion of sort of variety of transportation options. We worked on some really interesting, actually city-owned, Uber-like self-driving car systems, for example, a couple of years ago. And what was fascinating is cities want it. It's fine to have private enterprise kind of own part of your transportation, but when you need to move old age folks, when people with mobility issues, etc., and when you need to move people that may live in more on the outskirts or of a city, for example, that type of transportation doesn't typically exist. Your Ubers, your taxis don't really reach out into outskirt neighborhoods very well. So that's one flavor. Another flavor is bikes and scooters, which has transformed cities like New York, like Milan. When I go to the Milan Furniture Fair, I get one of the local bikes, and it's fantastic. I get point-to-point directions through my headset, and I can actually look at the city and enjoy it. That is a radical change. And if I'll add one more, when you look at the transformation of food delivery, which used to be done by gasoline car, then was done by electric car. Lots of cars double parked in cities, etc. Now in Lisbon, where I live half the time, all of it is delivered on electric bikes, which is silent and doesn't take up any room, doesn't add very much to traffic. These types of services absolutely benefit from a range of electric and self-driving solutions.
It was really interesting to go to Shanghai this year after not going there for 4 years because of COVID, etc. It was like the nearest I think I got to time travel, that you came out of the hotel and it's electric. It's like this silence. I wouldn't say silence, but compared to where it was 4 years ago, it was noisy. It was engines, it was horns, and you've got this kind of calmness of electric vehicles moving around.
Yeah,
it was amazing.
Yeah, I think the same could be said for a lot of cities where that's happening. That the noise is noticeably reduced.
Yeah.
Particularly from the kind of sort of gas, the very noisy kind of Vespa traffic and all of that seems to have diminished massively. Can we talk about trains? I know this is Kirsty. Your studio has been doing amazing work with train travel for a long time, and also aviation. But let's start with trains. I mean, we've been talking about electrification. That's nothing new to trains. But maybe you could talk about some of the other exciting developments in travel.
Electrification is common in train, in the train world, but there are still parts of the country which, are waiting for electrification. So, if you're living, on the Transpennine network, then it's only just been agreed, I think, earlier this year that electrification is going to come. And that's really important because I think we can see through the growth of any public transport system kind of historically that, socio and economic growth comes from, strong public transport infrastructure. And we've been working in North America with Brightline, who are a private train operator, who are operating in Miami, and they're building a line between Vegas and Los Angeles, and we're working on that bit. But I had the good fortune to travel to Miami a couple of years ago to experience their transport system, and it is kind of truly like transport utopia. I mean, it's really interesting. Brightline come actually from a more of a hospitality background. They've the people that kind of lead the business come from Disney and MGM kind of cruises, and it's very, very kind of user focused, and it is seamless. The integration of scooter, bikes, shared vehicles, it's all really clearly branded and accessible, but it's also built around kind of transit-oriented developments, which of course are generating kind of communities around that network. So we're seeing, I think, great transformation in places like North America, but it's slow because it's a very different system. In Europe, we're about to see the launch of our night jet service for Austrian Rail, OBB, that's going to come at the end of November. And that is truly going to kind of revolutionize, I think, certainly country travel from country to country in mainland Europe. It's going to be a compelling alternative to flying. So it's a very exciting time.
I remember you did a wonderful project a few years ago with looking at train travel and the inefficiencies of the speeding up and slowing down.
Oh yeah, moving platforms.
Between cities. What was it called?
Moving platforms.
Moving platforms, exactly. Maybe you could tell us all about that.
That is that's a concept from quite some time ago, but it was looking at reducing the amount of infrastructure that's required to kind of build stations and high-speed train networks. So if you have a high-speed train kind of passing through a city, obviously to deliver that high-speed train directly into the city requires a lot of infrastructure and building work, as we see with HS2. And the concept was around if you could take the high-speed train out to, keep it on the outskirts of a city and take a tram, for example, or another slower train out to the outskirts of the city, then the two trains essentially dock and you make a transfer from one train to the other.
While
it's
moving.
Quite out there.
Have you done any work around trains?
No, but I wanted to, well, not really. Some interiors, but not really. But what I was going to recommend is a book called The Ministry for the Future for anybody who has climate anxiety. And we all do, of course, we should. But there is a great sort of moment in there where you see someone traveling from Zurich to San Francisco by train across Europe, and then from Lisbon taking an airship to the United States. And this notion of completely reducing, to zero emissions from airplanes by boarding airships, which are slower, of course, but also create a rhythm and a sort of change, and a very sort of very comfortable. Imagine it's like a yacht, but it's it's in the air. But I think we need to do more work as designers and entrepreneurs into the future of flying, essentially.
I think on the back of that, when I was at Innovate UK, the Connected Places Catapult, they did some brilliant innovation using VR headsets for designers so that they could see what it's like to walk around a train station if you have glaucoma or there was various different eye disorders, AMD is it? There's that variety of different ones. So you could put the headset on and look at the sign and see, oh, I can't see the center of that, or I can't see the outside, or it's blurry, or depending on what that person's condition was. So it enables the designers to really think about some of these concerns more when they're designing train stations or any kind of transport hub. Just using virtual reality as a new tool. It was really very good.
Is that some tools you're using in your studio, Kirsty?
I mean, we're kind of using VR kind of a great deal, both in the way in which we design as part of the design process, but also the ways in which we kind of engage with users. And I think, one of the really interesting uses of it is for, people, for example, with neurodiversity issues, to kind of anticipate and plan journeys so that they feel much more comfortable and confident when they're embarking on a journey, know where to go, know where to find help. And it's much more reassuring.
Surely there must be some standardized documentation or tools that already enable all designers across the world to deal with these common issues.
Yeah, I think there is, but I think it is, in that environment, I think, those specifications which are being delivered often through actually innovation programs, there are lots of new things, and so I think there is less standardization around that because it's coming, isn't it?
Yeah, there's guidance, but obviously we're finding more and more things out about, you're talking about neurodiversity with if someone has ASD or autism, for example, some of the challenges for one person will be very different to another, and we're understanding more and more. So as our understanding builds, then more and more guidance will be provided. But it's things like black mats black mats in front of a building for people with dementia are a no-no. People with Alzheimer's, mirrors are a no-no. There's so many things that we're learning, and it's only in the last 10 years really that these things have become a lot more prevalent in the design, as I mentioned earlier. So I think guidance will definitely come, but it's going to be dynamic guidance because we're not going to say, right, that's it, that's all the conditions we have, we're allowed as humans, no more. They're going to keep coming. So
I think what's interesting is the technologies we're using, the tools we have as designers, is that you can create these experiences so that you can actually go into someone else's viewpoint and look at things. And Bentley, the team were taking me through straight away how we can use light, sound, and the experience to kind of get someone in control who has in a kind of stress situation to calm them down and bring that kind of ambience. And you can pitch that at all kinds of levels, experiencing it through the eyes of someone else and then coming up with solutions to tackle those issues. So
and then talking about different viewpoints, of course, we talk about or we think of these different modes of transport being replicable in different territories of the world. But are you doing any work with sort of ethnographic studies, any of you, to understand what understand the cultural differences, what people want in one side of the world might be different from the other side of the world? There may be some an appetite for it somewhere and a resistance somewhere else.
For certainly what's interesting is studying especially the next generation of new customers. We're of course working very, very quickly. The obvious ones are, they're very interested in sustainability and the importance of that and doing the right thing. Doesn't matter what level they are in the customer chain. The other one is that they want connectivity and they want that seamless, their life kind of connects, especially with a car, and also comes out of that as well. So their seamless connectivity. And yes, they want the technology, but they don't want it as a technology overload. So it's a lot about taking things away. So we create an experience that's not frustrating. I mean, we've all been there when you get into a rental car and it's like, okay, where do I start with this? I'm not bright enough to work this out. And I go through that experience, and I'm a car designer who knows the technology, but I'm still kind of, it's too much. Yeah. So it is about stripping it away so that it's actually a nice experience. So we see that as well throughout the world, different customers that they want definitely sustainability, and that's important to them. The brand as well, authenticity, but using technology in the right way that's presented to them in a good manner.
I think that going back to what Yves was saying about some of the clickbait media, one of the things we're finding from our studies, they're not global, they are local, but is that people know that there are challenges. People know there are nuances and differences between rural and urban, and all of those things that we've got to work through. People accept them. They're not kind of. It's a bit misleading. Some of the things that we will see in the media that EVs are all going to set on fire and micro-mobility scooters are all going to set on fire and burn your house down, and there's a lot of people who majority of people have common sense, and I think the thing that we're finding through our studies is that people are considerate of that fact, and they know that we are working through these things with good reason, and things might be a little bit slower than we'd like, but it's all for good reason, and most people accept that and understand why it's taken the time.
I think designers have really a responsibility to, as Robin was saying, to strip away the complexity. I got my mom a Model 3 about 2 or 3 years ago, and she's like 82, 83. So for her to adapt to a completely new type of vehicle was, a couple of days of work, but she did, and she would never go back. And I think there's so much traditionally in the car industry that has been about putting more bells and whistles in there, putting more complexity. And it's interesting now that we're meeting with journalists and investors on Tello, they're clamoring, they're asking for simplicity. They're asking for designers to be the ultimate decision makers and editors of that level of complexity. And for me, that is always, in any new technological product, it's always the key to success, to mainstream success, is taking things away rather than acting like technologists who are, always want to add things in there. So if you remove complexity from these types of products, you get a much wider adoption across a much wider range of people, old, young, technologically savvy or not.
I would just like to ask about infrastructural change. A lot of this is reliant on widespread infrastructural change that maybe is implemented by a wide variety of stakeholders, and ultimately has the green light from perhaps our politicians. You've already mentioned the developments in the last week in the UK, but is political will slowing us down, do you think, in the adaptation of these technologies?
Yes.
Yeah, well,
yes.
How you, Robin?
I think the important one is the infrastructure. To really embrace electrification, you need the infrastructure around, and then the anxiety drops in terms of range, and people see it developing. So I definitely think the governments have got a place that they need to support the infrastructure. I think and you touched on this earlier, the companies themselves want to move into electrification. This is a great journey to be on, and we know we're doing the right thing. It feels wrong almost to slow that down, because we all can see the problems with climate change. I mean, it's super clear this year with the weather systems around the world. We've got to do something, and quickly. What we need is the governments to actually put the infrastructure in and keep building it so that everyone is very comfortable with driving anywhere they want to go.
And Yves, from your point of view, albeit a very different country, how are things in the States?
Well, I live half the time in San Francisco, the other half in Portugal. Sure. And in the US, the infrastructure for EV and charging is stellar because the government said, okay, yes, let Tesla build all this stuff. So, but now they said, you need to open it to everyone, which was the right thing to do. Yeah. So you need you need to be enabled to do these things. You also need enforcement down the line, and I think that's an important role. On the other hand, there are other countries in Europe, including Portugal, where the infrastructure isn't there for EVs, and that is absolutely certainly slowing down progress there. And it's so critical. I mean, I'll just use one number. Pickup trucks in the US represent, believe it or not, 10.5% of all emissions. All emissions. Talking about, domestic electricity, industrial, et cetera, et cetera. So enabling change, you can make double-digit progress in terms of carbon emissions. And that is the case, probably in a majority of places where if you support, if you create the infrastructure needed, progress happens much faster, and the consumer is much more likely to adopt these new technologies.
Let's have a question. And we have some microphones. This guy very, very keenly put up his hand. If you just wait for the mic, there you go.
Hi, okay. We've heard a lot about electrification, but what about hydrogen? What's the future of
Who wants to talk about that?
Well, about 12 years ago, one very large European manufacturer of cars presented hydrogen-powered cars at TED. And at the same time, the same year, Google presented their self-driving cars on top of a garage with a drop on all sides, which was 6 floors. I was one of the first in, and those cars were zipping out and racing and screeching tires around cones on top of this garage. I mean, if we had missed a turn, I think we would have been down 6 floors. And over 10 years ago, I made a statement in Wired UK magazine stating how behind European car manufacturers were and what position they were putting them themselves in, and how hydrogen wasn't the solution, because you still have traditional powertrains and engines, etc., with hydrogen, and that is we think about electric versus other sort of gasoline based or type of technology, and it's not just one versus the other, it's all of the surrounding issues. Why not get rid of all the gas stations in the cities? Do you like gas stations? Do you like the way they smell? Do you like the way they look? We're going to have more gas stations if we have hydrogen technology in cars. There is sort of a trickling of other issues around some of these proposals, some of these ideas that simply are not, I would say, the ultimate solution we should get to.
No, I agree. I think what's the beauty of electrification is the bigger picture, which is what you're saying, that you can take solar panels, charge your car. When the grid changes, you can use that as a power unit for the house. If you're off camping or something, you can use it as your power source there. You can share between cars, you can power a motorcycle. It's that bigger branch. And I think the hydrogen route is a replacement for petrol. So certainly electrification isn't boring. I mean, it's you drive an electric car, they're damn fast. and it has all these advantages of more space, and we can play from different scales. So I think that's why the industry's embraced electrification going forward.
Thanks. Yeah, just picking up on your comment earlier about the change. I think you call it the premium proportions when you were talking about the changing proportions of the car. Just thinking about what electrification means for luxury in the future. So, you've still got the brand, you've still got your craftsmanship and materials, but you haven't got the huge engine, you haven't got the performance kind of comes with the technology rather than the brand. So just wondered what your thoughts were on how it changes luxury markets.
It's a nice question, thank you. Because for me, what electrification brings is the quietness and the refinement and the more space in the cabin. Because you haven't got this big unit at the front, it enables then the customer has got more of a living room experience. It's quiet. It reminds me a little bit of the smoking ban when the suddenly you can smell the toilets because the smoke's gone out of the nightclubs. It's kind of the petrol engine's gone, and suddenly now you've got a different experience. You've got this quieter experience. You can reconnect with all the senses in the car. So I think it opens up in terms of the luxury sector. It really is a good thing. I mean, it's the silent sports car. It's the luxury limousine. It's clean. It's quiet, and it brings also the technology with it. So absolutely. And I don't think we lose the traditional proportions. That's probably what you're hinting at. Is that certainly with Bentley, we have a traditional proportion of long bonnets and kind of the cabin at the back, but we have ways of still capturing the elements of Bentley design, which is the kind of the vertical front, the proportions of short overhang to long overhang at the back. The graceful lines can still exist, but the interior space can grow, and that we all like more space and to enjoy that within the same overall dimensions of the car. So thumbs up for electrification for the luxury sector.
Yeah, question here. I think we've got time for one or two more.
I think we touched on sustainability earlier, and I just had a question, and I would love to hear your view on, we're going to get rid of a lot of petrol-fueled cars and vehicles, airplanes, buses, trains, we mentioned earlier. What are your takes on retrofitting, and, what is the needs there? Because it's a lot of trash that we can put somewhere.
I'll take that.
Somewhere.
So it's been about 20 years that I'm asked this question: why do we need another chair? Why do we need another car? And a wonderful answer from Russ Lovegrove is, why do we need another book? The reason why, when I designed the sail chair for Herman Miller, it uses less than half of the carbon footprint in terms of materials, production, than a standard chair. So you can choose as an industry to continue to produce the materials and the goods that use 50%, 60%, 70% more energy and more carbon, or you can switch to the new technologies that allow you to reduce it greatly, and you can set in place whether it's warranties or parts change and recycling, etc. So the sail chair is warranted for 12 years. So I think I'm all for retrofitting. I retrofitted a vintage car with an electric engine. Why? Because I don't like to have my vehicle in the garage half the year. I don't like the cost of that, and I don't like not having use of that vehicle. So yeah, I'm all for retrofitting existing cars to electric. I think especially good-looking ones and vintage ones. But overall, I would say as an industry, moving forward is a way to significantly cut down on both emissions and materials.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you, Robin, Kirsty, Karla, and Yves. Thank you. Please give them a round of applause.